Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today, thanks to the really insightful material you sent over, we're diving into something pretty profound. We're looking at the really intricate relationship between language and culture.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. And this deep dive, it goes way beyond just, vocabulary lists or grammar rules. We're exploring how the words we use, the way we put sentences together, even the sounds we make. They're not just tools. They actually reflect our history. They shape how we see the world. And, well, they kind of drive how cultures live and evolve.
Exactly.
So our mission today is basically to pull out the key insights from your sources, get you up to speed quickly and thoroughly on this really complex, fascinating subject.
And what hits you straight away from the material is just how deeply tangled these two things are, language and culture. Language isn't just presented as a communication tool, right? It's shown as this dynamic storehouse of collective knowledge, almost like a living mirror reflecting a society's values, its structures. And it's active. It's constantly shaping our cultural landscape.
Active. I like that.
So, yeah, the aim today is really to unpack the core ideas, give some essential context, and just emphasize how huge and often surprising the influence of language is on, well, pretty much everything cultural.
Okay, let's really unpack this then. The material frames language not just as like an add-on to culture, but absolutely central. You said it like its heartbeat. So how do the sources describe this connection? Is it just a tool or is it, deeper?
Oh, it's definitely presented as much deeper. The sources really emphasize language's role as an essential archive. Think about that. It holds centuries of history, social values, norms, all embedded right there in its structure, its words.
Wow.
But crucially, it's not passive. It's described as this dynamic, active catalyst. It's constantly constructing, sustaining, and, reshaping culture, in response to changing environments, new tech, social interactions.
So it's not just about culture.
Exactly. The insight is, it is culture's living memory, constantly reflecting and shaping who we are.
Okay, so if language is this living archive, this active shaper, then it becomes the bedrock of our identity, right? Our cultural identity. So what do the sources say about language being this absolute foundation?
Well, they argue really compellingly that language isn't just a tool for sending messages back and forth. It's a cornerstone. It encapsulates the very essence of a group's history, their values, their whole worldview.
Right.
And for many communities, especially those whose languages have been under pressure historically, just speaking their native language becomes this incredibly potent act of cultural affirmation. It's like saying, this is who we are, this is where we come from, it's defiance, it's survival.
And when we look at indigenous languages, the material mentions examples like Navajo in the U.S. or Maori in New Zealand. It stresses they're way more than just communication systems. They're called vessels of unique epistemologies. Can you break that down a bit?
Epistemologies, yeah, it's a key concept here. Basically, it means distinct ways of knowing. These languages carry unique conceptual frameworks for understanding reality. Frameworks tied specifically to that culture's history, environment, beliefs.
Okay.
So if you try to literally translate them into, say, English, which has a totally different cultural background, well, you often lose these embedded ways of knowing. The essence just vanishes.
So it's not just the words are different.
Exactly. The real takeaway isn't just word difference. It's that the very structure of the language can encode a whole unique way of experiencing reality.
That's a really powerful idea. Could you maybe paint a clearer picture, like with the Navajo example from the material? How does a language like that actually embed a worldview?
Sure. Navajo or Diné-Bizaad is a great example. Its structure, the way its verbs and nouns work, it embeds these really complex ideas about kinship, but reciprocal obligations, harmony with nature. It's built right into the grammar. Well, for instance, certain grammatical forms might inherently emphasize the relationship between the speaker and the natural world in a way that English doesn't. You can describe the concept in English, of course, but the language structure itself doesn't reinforce it in the same way. And that says a lot about the cultural priorities embedded in Navajo.
Fascinating. So the grammar itself shapes thought about family or nature. And the Maori example, how does wanao work in Te Reo Maori?
Right. With Maori, Te Reo Maori, the term wanao is a key illustration they use. A dictionary might just say family, simple enough. But its cultural weight is so much deeper. Wanao refers to this extended family unit, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, even adopted relatives, close friends. It's way broader than the sort of nuclear family idea.
Much more interconnected.
Totally. The word itself emphasizes communal bonds, shared responsibilities, collective identity. These are absolutely central concepts in Maori culture. And the English word family, well, it often just doesn't capture that same depth or breadth.
Wow. Okay, so these words are packed with cultural meaning that goes way beyond simple translation, which makes the whole issue of language loss incredibly poignant, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the material really flags this as a critical threat to global cultural diversity. It mentions the UNESCO estimate, which is pretty sobering. Out of maybe 7,000 languages spoken today, over 3,000, that's more than 40%, are predicted to disappear by 2100.
40%. Wow.
And it's not just a statistic. When a language dies, entire systems of unique cultural knowledge just vanish with it. Knowledge about local ecology, traditional medicine, unique ways of telling stories, songs, spiritual practices, ways of understanding history and the world encoded only in that language. It's the loss of a whole way of seeing.
That's a truly heavy thought. But the material also points to some hope, right? There are revitalization efforts happening.
Yes, thankfully. It does highlight vibrant language revitalization efforts. Really powerful examples of cultural survival. Things like the immersion schools for Hawaiian, the Kanahunamoku program is mentioned, or community-based efforts to boost Welsh in Wales. These are presented as these profound cultural movements, not just, academic exercises. Communities are actively reclaiming their linguistic heritage, often pushing back against decades or centuries of marginalization.
So revitalizing the language is literally revitalizing the culture.
Exactly. It's inseparable.
Makes sense. The material then shifts focus a bit, looking at how language shapes personal identity, especially for people who are multilingual.
Yeah, and what's really insightful here is the discussion around code switching.
Right.
This is basically where multilingual people fluidly switch between languages or dialects. Depends on the social setting, who they're talking to, even the topic. The material uses a common example, like a Mexican-American person may be speaking Spanish at home with family, but then switching to English at work or school.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this flexibility isn't just practical. It's deeply tied to identity. Spanish might feel more connected to heritage, while English is maybe linked to broader society opportunities. And this negotiation, it often leads to what the source calls a hybrid identity, blending different cultural and linguistic backgrounds in really unique personal ways.
That's fascinating. It's like language lets people navigate different parts of who they are. And this must connect strongly to diaspora communities too, people living away from their ancestral homes.
Oh, absolutely. For individuals and whole communities living outside their ancestral homelands, language is often the most tangible, the most vital link back to their cultural roots. The source gives the example of second-generation Punjabi Canadians. They often make deliberate efforts to maintain Punjabi, even while being fluent in English and fully part of Canadian life.
How do they do that?
Through things like language classes, cultural festivals, community radio, or media in Punjabi, these practices actively reinforce that sense of dual identity. It lets people honor their heritage while fully participating in their current society. It's a bridge.
And this drive to preserve language, both personally and as a community, it seems fundamentally tied to the idea of cultural sovereignty, right? Asserting their right to be culturally.
Very much so.
Yeah.
The material really emphasizes that these community-led efforts to preserve and revitalize endangered languages are powerful assertions of cultural sovereignty. It talks about efforts by Aboriginal Australian communities for languages like Walpiri. These are often grassroots projects, community radio, school programs in the language.
Right.
And these efforts are explicitly framed as pushing back against historical suppression during colonial times. Assimilation policies, forcing English-only schooling. It's reclaiming what was taken.
So it's a form of cultural resistance, self-determination. The Irish Gaelic example is similar then, pushing back against suppression.
It is. The revitalization of Irish Gaelic, Gaelge, is presented as another really powerful case study. It's supported by government policy now, featured prominently in media like the Irish language TV channel TG4. This effort shows how a language can be actively pulled back from the brink and used to reassert cultural autonomy, national identity. It really shows how policy and community action can work hand in hand to reclaim a heritage.
Okay, so we've seen how language defines who we are individually and as groups, but what about how we connect or maybe disconnect with each other? The material moves on to explore this dual role, language fostering social cohesion, but sometimes also creating division.
Yeah, connecting this to the bigger picture. Having a shared language is just foundational for creating shared spaces, for mutual understanding within any community. A common language makes interaction easier, helps establish those unspoken social rules, builds trust. It gives you the basic framework for daily life, shared rituals, social stuff. It gives it common meaning.
Can you give us some more specific examples from the material, how shared language builds community and reinforces values?
Sure. Japan's system of honorifics, kaigo, is a prime example.
Ah, yes, Keigo.
It's not just being polite, it's this intricate linguistic system built right into the grammar, word choice, phrasing, all designed to show precise levels of respect based on social hierarchy, age, relationship. Using kaigo properly strengthens social bonds, maintains harmony. It reflects deep cultural values, respect, humility, group orientation. And misusing it, that can actually disrupt things.
Wow, so it really structures interaction.
Absolutely. Another powerful example comes from African languages, like Yoruba. Proverbs are incredibly important culturally. There's a proverb, and I'll paraphrase the meaning, like, one hand can't lift someone up just as one leg can't walk. Basically, it takes a village.
Right.
This saying, used all the time, doesn't just state something, it actively encapsulates and reinforces this core value of collective responsibility, mutual support. It guides behavior, strengthens unity.
Those are great examples. Language isn't just functional, it guides behavior, reinforces structures. The Spanish sobremesa tradition is also mentioned, right?
Yes, sobremesa. It's that cultural practice in many Spanish-speaking places of just lingering at the table, talking, socializing, long after the meal's done.
I love that idea.
It's not just a long chat. It's a cultural ritual focused on connection through conversation. Language is obviously key here. It's used to strengthen family bonds, social ties through relaxed, extended talk. It really highlights how cultural habits and relationship building are often built around shared ways of talking. The value placed on just talking together.
So language as this powerful unifier, creating shared space, strengthening bonds. But the material also points out the flip side. Language can divide.
It certainly can. Even within bigger language groups, variations like dialects and accents often carry a lot of social weight. They can signal where you're from, your social class, your ethnicity. And sadly, these linguistic markers can lead to unconscious bias, exclusion, reinforcing social layers.
Like class divides.
Yeah, the UK example is noted. How distinct accents like Cockney, historically linked to working-class London, versus received pronunciation, the sort of posh standard, carry strong social baggage. These differences can reinforce class divides. And India is presented as this incredibly complex case. You've got this amazing linguistic richness, over 1,600 languages and dialects, huge cultural pride there.
Incredible.
But the material points out it's also been a source of political and social tension. The debate over making Hindi the sole national language, for example, sparked major resistance in non-Hindi areas, like Tamil Nadu. It shows how language can become this potent symbol for regional or ethnic identity, sometimes leading to conflict against what's seen as linguistic dominance.
And the material also connects this to power dynamics, especially going back to colonial history.
Yeah, this is a crucial point about colonial legacies, that the languages imposed by colonizers often became the languages of power, government, education, business. This naturally marginalized local indigenous languages and the cultures tied to them. In Nigeria, for instance, English is still the official language, the main language in formal settings, so indigenous languages like Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, even though spoken by millions, can be sidelined officially or professionally. This can perpetuate power structures inherited from that era, affect access to opportunities for those less fluent in English.
That's a stark example of language maintaining inequality. But the source also gives a contrasting example, where language bridges divides.
Yes, it does. The rise of Swahili across East Africa is a powerful counterpoint. Swahili developed historically as a lingua franca, a common tongue, mainly for trade and communication among diverse groups along the coast.
Ah, trade language.
Exactly. And today, it functions as this unifying language in countries like Tanzania and Kenya. It helps communication, fosters a sense of shared East African identity, bridges linguistic gaps that could otherwise be barriers. It really shows how a language can evolve into a tool for connection and shared identity across diverse peoples.
It's amazing how language plays these opposite roles, dividing and uniting. The material also gets into language's role in social movements, driving cultural change.
Yes, language is undeniably fundamental for mobilizing people, shaping collective action, driving change. Think about the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. The power of language was just immense. The rhetoric and speeches, especially Dr. King's "I Have a Dream," masterfully crafted.
Absolutely iconic.
He used powerful metaphors, repetition, language rooted in shared values, religious appeals, all to inspire millions, paint a vision of equality, and challenge those deeply embedded segregationist norms. And in South Africa, during the anti-apartheid struggle, the movement was incredibly linguistically diverse. It reflected the resistance itself.
How so?
Protest songs, slogans, they often deliberately mixed multiple languages: Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Afrikaans, English. This linguistic mix wasn't accidental. It was a conscious statement of solidarity across language lines, uniting different groups against the common enemy, creating this shared cultural expression of defiance.
And looking at today's movements, social media is obviously a huge platform for this.
Totally. Modern movements like hashtag Black Lives Matter heavily use language on platforms like X. Hashtags become these global rallying cries. Slogans spread instantly. Messages get crafted and shared in multiple languages. This creates global solidarity, amplifying cultural messages way beyond borders, uniting diverse groups around shared causes. It's a powerful demo of how language isn't just for communicating dissent, but actively challenging dominant narratives and mobilizing action on a massive scale.
Okay, shifting to another crucial area. Cultural transmission. The material explores language as the primary way culture gets passed down through generations. This is where oral traditions become so vital, right? Especially in cultures without long-written histories.
Absolutely. In many cultures, oral traditions are the main way knowledge, history, values are kept alive and shared. The source highlights West African griots. These are esteemed historians, musicians, oral poets in societies like the Mandinka. They use really complex oral techniques in languages like Mandinka to preserve genealogies, recount history, perform epics, pass down moral lessons. Their role is just crucial for cultural memory.
And these aren't just static recitations.
No, they're living things. The material mentions Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, passed down in languages like Aronte. While they preserve ancient narratives, creation, land, beliefs, these stories can also evolve. They adapt. They show the flexibility of cultural transmission through language. These stories are incredibly rich archives encoding vital knowledge about the environment, complex spiritual beliefs, social structures.
So language holds this deep cultural memory orally. But written language is also fundamental, right? For codifying and transmitting culture across time and space.
It absolutely is. Written language plays this critical complementary role, preserving and transmitting culture through literature, religious texts, legal codes, history books, texts like Homer's Iliad or the Ramayana in Sanskrit. They're presented not just as great literature, but as foundational cultural touchstones. They've shaped ethics, values, art for centuries.
And religious texts, too.
Hugely important cultural anchors, the Quran in Arabic, the Torah in Hebrew. They've profoundly influenced not just religious practice, but art, law, social norms in their cultures for millennia. Written language also enables modern preservation, like transcribing previously oral histories in indigenous languages, say Quechua in Peru, to make sure those narratives survive in written form. And digital archives like the Endangered Languages Project online are cataloging languages using text, audio, video, ensuring survival in the digital age.
And the digital age itself has really shaken up cultural transmission via language, hasn't it?
Oh, it's transformed it significantly. Digital media, online platforms, powerful tools now, sometimes bypassing old gatekeepers. Social media lets communities share stories, songs, traditions globally, instantly.
Right.
The source gives examples like Cherokee language teachers using online videos to teach the syllabary to people scattered far apart, or Inuit communities sharing oral histories in Inuktitut on podcasts. These tools kind of democratize cultural transmission, make it accessible across huge distances like never before.
But there are downsides, too.
Yeah, the challenge is the sheer dominance of English online. It can unintentionally marginalize smaller languages, contribute to a kind of digital cultural sameness. But there are active counter-efforts. Promoting multilingual content is key. Platforms like Wikipedia actively supporting articles in tons of languages, including smaller ones. The aim is to preserve and share knowledge digitally across diverse linguistic communities.
Okay, stepping into creativity now. The material calls language the fundamental backbone of artistic expression. How does it elaborate on that?
Well, it's maybe most obvious in literature and poetry. The source notes poetry actually has this unique power to distill a culture's essence through linguistic precision. Careful word choice, arrangement, evoking deep cultural meaning.
Like haiku.
Exactly. Japanese haiku, with its strict 5-7-5 syllable structure. That form's conciseness often reflects Zen Buddha's principles, capturing fleeting moments, insights, in a very culturally specific way. Or the Persian ghazal, a lyrical form exploring love, spirituality, embodying specific cultural aesthetics and emotions. And broader literature, too. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is highlighted. Written in English, but he deliberately weaves in Igbo proverbs, idioms, narrative styles. Achebe uses language not just to tell the story, but to subtly highlight the clash between colonial and indigenous realities through the language itself.
So language provides the structure and the deep cultural resonance. What about music and performance arts?
Language is just as vital there, conveying cultural narratives, emotion, identity. Think Bob Dylan's folk songs steeped in American counterculture, voicing the 60s movements. Or Fela Kuti's Afrobeat, often sung in Yoruba and English mix, a powerful political tool protesting Nigerian oppression, carrying specific cultural messages in its lyrics and rhythms.
Right.
The source even notes some instrumental music mimics linguistic patterns, like West African drumming traditions imitating the tonal patterns of spoken languages like Yoruba. Shows a deep connection.
Wow. And theater, film, and the translation challenges.
Theater and film use language to explore social issues through specific cultural lenses. Playwrights like Brecht in German, August Wilson capturing African-American dialects, they use language to build worlds reflecting particular cultures.
And translating that must be hard.
Incredibly complex. Subtitles and dubbing help access, sure. But the material points out translating cultural nuance, humor, sarcasm, slang, idioms is really tough. How something said in the original language is often tied so closely to a cultural context. There's just no direct equivalent. It shows how much can get lost trying to convey full cultural meaning in translation.
Is there any link made to visual arts? Does language influence that?
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially where text and image meet. Calligraphy in Arabic and Chinese cultures is a prime example. Written word as high art, embodying cultural aesthetics, discipline, spirituality. Graffiti art, too. Often uses slogans, tags, phrases reflecting urban culture, social commentary, like street art in Brazilian favelas using Portuguese phrases about inequality, language in visual form capturing culture.
Okay, let's shift to the sacred now. The material highlights language's absolute centrality in religious expression and practice.
Yes, religion is another area where language plays this fundamental, often sacred role. Religious texts, Bible, Quran, Vedas, they're not just spiritual guides, they're foundational cultural cornerstones. They shape beliefs, morality, law, art, social norms for ages.
And specific languages are often seen as sacred for rituals.
Exactly. Arabic in Islamic prayers, regardless of your native tongue, that creates this linguistic link among Muslims globally. Reinforces shared religious and cultural identity rooted in the holy text language. Similarly, traditional Sanskrit in many Hindu rituals connects people to ancient traditions, shared linguistic heritage. Or historical Latin in the Catholic liturgy created linguistic unity across Europe for centuries.
But languages adapt here too.
They do. The shift to using local languages in Catholic Mass after Vatican II reflected broader cultural moves towards accessibility. And translating core Buddhist texts into Tibetan or Thai over centuries shows how spiritual practices adapt to specific cultures through language.
So language unifies and adapts within religion and clearly reinforces identity for groups.
It does, often creating a distinct shared community.
Yeah.
The modern revival of Hebrew in Israel is a key example, strongly tied not just to national identity, but Jewish cultural and religious identity, transforming a liturgical language into a living, modern one.
Can it also divide?
The material acknowledges that too. Religious language can sometimes mark division, like distinct uses of Sanskrit in Hindu rituals versus Urdu in many Islamic contexts in South Asia can sometimes symbolize divides, influence perceptions, create boundaries. But it also notes the potential for connection. Interfaith dialogues rely on finding shared linguistic ground or careful translation to bridge gaps.
Okay, moving to a different kind of power. The material describes language as a powerful political instrument.
Yes, fundamentally intertwined with politics. Language is used deliberately shaping narratives, influencing opinion, asserting or negotiating power. Political rhetoric leans heavily on language to mobilize cultural identities, appeal to shared values, persuade, sometimes divide.
Like Mandela.
Nelson Mandela, renowned for using language to unite a divided South Africa, often mixing Xhosa, his native language, with English in speeches, strategically reaching out to diverse communities for a common cause. Nationalist movements also frequently use language as a powerful symbol, asserting cultural autonomy, political distinctiveness. The use of Catalan in Catalonia, Spain, is a prime example. Promoting Catalan is central to asserting Catalan identity and the push for more autonomy.
And government language policies themselves are political.
Deeply political. Decisions about language use reflect underlying priorities, national identity, cultural inclusion, sometimes assimilation. Canada's official bilingualism, English-French, is a political choice for cultural pluralism. Contrast that with, say, Turkey's historical prioritization of Turkish, which sometimes marginalized Kurdish, causing friction. It shows how policies can unite or divide.
So language fuels nationalism often. Are there examples given of policies trying to promote inclusivity among multiple language groups?
Yes. Switzerland is a prominent example. 4 official languages, German, French, Italian, Romansh. They've developed policies and structures aiming to accommodate and promote each group, balancing national unity with celebrating diversity. A model, though complex.
Okay, and another foundational area, education, discussed as a key arena for language's cultural impact.
Education systems are critical, both for language transmission and cultural preservation. Bilingual education programs, like for Maori in New Zealand or Welsh in Wales, are often designed explicitly to teach the language and preserve cultural heritage alongside it.
So it's not just language class.
No, it's immersion, fostering fluency and cultural pride, often a direct response to historical marginalization by dominant language schools like those English-only colonial ones. The resurgence of indigenous language programs like Navajo immersion schools in the U.S. fits this, teaching the whole curriculum through the native language, embedding cultural values, histories, ways of knowing.
And beyond preservation.
Language education is increasingly seen as vital for global competence. In our interconnected world, speaking multiple languages is a huge asset. It gives you the tools to navigate diverse cultures, fosters empathy, cross-cultural understanding. Programs like Erasmus Plus in Europe, encouraging student exchanges and language learning, reflect this value.
Okay, let's dig a bit deeper into technology's influence, building on earlier points about preservation and social media.
Technology keeps offering powerful tools for language preservation and access. Crucial, given the threats many languages face, digital archives like the Rosetta Project work to document and store data from thousands of languages. Invaluable resources. And apps like Memrise are adding courses for smaller or endangered languages like Shona or Sami, makes heritage more accessible, especially for diaspora communities.
What about machine translation, like Google Translate?
Huge impact, obviously. The material discusses its effect on cultural nuance. Tools like Google Translate are great for basic communication, but the material highlights big limitations with cultural subtleties. Idioms, slang, humor, tonal languages, where tone changes meaning. Machines struggle.
Right, literal translation can mess things up.
Completely distort meaning or miss context. It really underlines the need for culturally sensitive tech development and, maybe more importantly, the irreplaceable value of skilled human translators who get both the language and the culture. And social media keeps shaping cultural exchange. Platforms like X are central now. Hashtags adopted and translated like hashtag Yotambian or hashtag Enacommand for hashtag MeToo create global resonance for shared experiences. They cross language barriers but allow culturally specific expression.
But the English dominance issue remains.
It does. The digital space is still heavily English, can potentially marginalize voices in smaller languages, reinforces the need for active efforts to promote and create content in more languages for equitable representation.
It seems really clear from all this that language isn't static at all. It's presented as this living thing, constantly adapting to cultural change.
Absolutely. It has to be permeable, dynamic, evolving alongside the cultures speaking it to stay relevant. Loan words are a clear sign. English adopting sushi, yoga, fiesta, kindergarten, chic, and endless examples. And other languages adopting English words like weekend, marketing.
Right, happens all the time.
This exchange enriches languages, adds concepts, but often keeps the cultural flavor of the original. And diaspora communities often create entirely new linguistic forms. Hybrid languages or codes blending elements creatively. Examples like Spanglish, Spanish plus English, or Hinglish, Hindi plus English. These aren't just random mixes.
Spanglish, yeah.
It often involves complex grammar, cultural references from both, reflecting a lived bicultural identity. These hybrids are powerful proof of language's incredible adaptability, responding to new realities, migration, navigating multiple linguistic worlds.
And globalization fuels this.
Massively. Complex impact. English as a dominant global lingua franca helps communication, sure. Business, science, pop culture. But this dominance can potentially overshadow or threaten local languages, especially smaller ones.
But globalization also fosters exchange.
On the other hand, yes. More exposure to other languages and cultures than ever. Efforts like EU language policies try to balance this, enable global connection via shared languages, while actively working to preserve the rich tapestry of local cultures. It's a constant negotiation.
Okay, taking a step back one last time, the material also looks at broader power dynamics tied to language globally, beyond just nations.
Yes, this is where linguistic imperialism comes in, a term describing the dominance of languages often linked to historical colonial power or current economic cultural clout. The global spread of English, French, Spanish reflects these broader power dynamics. English prevalence in global media, science publishing, business
Hmm.
can inadvertently marginalize cultures, not primarily operating in English, impacts their influence, visibility. The material points to underrepresentation of many African languages in global academic publishing, linking it partly to colonial legacies, where European languages suppressed indigenous ones and became languages of prestige, a legacy that lingers.
Even in places like the UN.
Yeah, even international institutions like the UN, where English and French often dominate daily operations. This can subtly affect representation and influence of member states whose main languages aren't as widely used. But there are counter-efforts. The African Union adding Swahili as an official working language is mentioned, aiming for greater cultural equity, more perspectives.
So translation on a global scale is deeply tied to power and representation.
Absolutely. Translation bridges divides, but also shapes how cultures are seen globally. Right. Translating literature, like Garcia Marquez from Spanish, introduces diverse perspectives. But nuance can be lost, always a risk. And in diplomacy, translating speeches at the UN, negotiations, accuracy and cultural sensitivity are paramount. Misunderstandings could have huge consequences, high stakes.
So bringing this all together as we wrap up, the material outlines some key challenges but also opportunities in a world with such incredible linguistic diversity.
It really stresses that linguistic diversity is one of humanity's greatest strengths, enriches knowledge, perspectives, creativity. But it also presents complexities for communication, national unity in diverse states, simple interaction.
How do we manage that?
Policies promoting multilingualism, like Singapore's 4 official languages, try to navigate this, balancing diversity and efficiency. Conversely, language conflicts, like historically in Belgium between Flemish and French speakers, show the challenges when linguistic differences align with political tensions. And technology remains double-edged. Huge opportunities for documentation, preservation, like the Digital Language Diversity Project, but risks worsening inequality if digital resources aren't accessible to all. The digital divide is linguistic, too.
And education's role.
Crucial. Fostering not just linguistic, but cultural fluency. Countries like Finland, where students learn Finnish, Swedish, English, are cited as examples, preparing people for a multilingual world, promoting heritage and global skills.
Wow, okay. We have covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. Identity, social bonds, cultural transmission, art, religion, politics, education, tech, adaptation, global power. It really hammers home that core idea. Language and culture are profoundly linked, multifaceted, touching almost every part of human life. Language isn't static, it's this living thing, evolving with culture, reflecting change while preserving heritage.
And in our interconnected world, the material strongly suggests embracing linguistic diversity isn't just, a nice idea. It's essential. Essential for genuine cultural appreciation, mutual respect, and just navigating global complexities effectively, ethically. By understanding, supporting, celebrating this interplay of language and culture, the implication is we help build a more inclusive global society, one that values its incredible tapestry of voices and ways of seeing.
That makes you think, doesn't it? Here's a final thought. If language truly shapes how we perceive the world, how might learning a new language, really engaging with it, fundamentally change your personal reality and open up entirely new ways of seeing?